A young police officer finds a hungry baby abandoned on the street and decides to breastfeed them herself. What happens next is astonishing. Here is the full translation of the document you uploaded, converted to American English as you requested. Ashley was a young police officer, known for her dedication and hard work, following a path that seemed natural in her life. When she met Brandon, a committed and devoted officer, Ashley found not only love, but also the inspiration to pursue the same career. Together, they formed a strong partnership, both in and out of work. The birth of their child brought a new meaning to their routine, but happiness was abruptly interrupted when Brandon lost his life during a dangerous operation, just a few months after their baby was born. Devastated by the loss, Ashley saw her life take an unexpected turn. However, aware of her responsibility as a mother, she found the strength to move forward, focusing on raising her child and dedicating herself to the work she loved. Motherhood became a pillar in her life, and her profession, a way to honor Brandon's memory. Still, the emptiness left by the loss was always present in her heart. That quiet afternoon, Ashley was at the station with her partner Stephen, organizing an endless pile of reports that had to be submitted by the end of the week. The sound of the printer filled the air as the two chatted to relieve the monotony of the bureaucratic work. "If I'd known being a cop meant dealing with so much paperwork, I would have picked another career," Stephen said, tossing a file full of reports onto the table, letting out a dramatic sigh. "Don't complain," Ashley responded with a slight smile. "Would you rather be in the middle of a gunfight or here, in the comfort of air conditioning?" "Honestly, depends on the day," he said, laughing. "And you? How's it going with the little one at home? I bet he's more trouble than any operation." Ashley shrugged, keeping her eyes on the documents. "Tiredness has become my middle name, but it's rewarding. Just looking at him, it feels like everything is worth it." Before Stephen could respond, the phone at the station rang, breaking the calm. He answered it while Ashley continued to fill out a form. "South District Station, Officer Stephen speaking. How can I help?" he said in a firm voice. A panicked female voice responded on the other end. "Hi, my name is Mia. I live on Hope Street, number 24. I think something's wrong. There's a baby crying non-stop in an alley nearby. It's a really loud cry and no one has come to pick it up. I'm worried." Stephen frowned. "A baby? Are you sure?" "Yes," the woman insisted. "The crying hasn't stopped for hours. It sounds like the baby was abandoned. I don't know what to do. Please, come quickly." Stephen motioned to Ashley, indicating she should listen. He put the phone on speaker. "Mrs. Mia," Ashley started, speaking calmly. "Did you see anyone leave the baby there? Or do you know who might be responsible?" "I didn't see anyone," Mia replied, now a little calmer. "I just heard the crying when I went out to take out the trash. I waited, but no one showed up." "Got it. We're on our way," Ashley said before Stephen hung up the phone. The two officers quickly stood up. Ashley grabbed her duty belt while Stephen checked to make sure the patrol car was ready to go. "Do you think it's really abandonment?" Stephen asked as they walked to the car. "I hope not," Ashley replied in a serious tone, "but we can't take any chances." On the way to Hope Street, the traffic was surprisingly light. Stephen drove while Ashley checked the GPS on the car's dashboard. "Sometimes, I don't understand how people can be so cruel," Stephen said, breaking the silence. "If they really abandoned a baby." "Not everyone values life the way they should," Ashley responded, keeping her eyes on the map. "It's sad, but we need to focus on helping those in need." They arrived at the address. It was a simple house with a small porch where a woman was anxiously waiting. She waved when she saw the patrol car pull up. "Ms. Mia?" Stephen asked as he got out of the car. "That's me," she answered, walking quickly toward them. Thank you for coming so quickly. Can you take us to the location? Ashley asked with urgency in her voice. Of course, it's just over there, Mia said, pointing to a narrow alley between two buildings. I was hanging laundry when I heard the crying. I waited a long time, but no one showed up. The officers followed Mia to the entrance of the alley. The place was dark, with walls stained with moisture and the ground covered in trash. She stopped at the entrance, pointing. It's down here, she said, hesitantly entering. The sound was coming from the back. Thank you, Ms. Mia, Stephen said. You can go back to your house now. We'll take care of it. Thanks, she replied, clearly relieved, before returning to her porch. Ashley and Stephen walked slowly down the alley, hearing the crying grow louder as they got closer. Finally, in a corner surrounded by old boxes and garbage bags, they spotted the baby. He was wrapped in a dirty blanket, his face red from crying. My God, Stephen murmured, approaching carefully. Who would do something like this? Ashley immediately knelt next to the baby, assessing the situation. He's dehydrated, she said, touching the child's dry skin. But he's alive. That's the most important thing right now. What do you think happened? Stephen asked, looking around for clues. This is disgusting. Ashley carefully picked up the baby, trying to calm him. He continued to cry desperately. He's hungry, she said firmly. How do you know that? Stephen asked, confused. I have a son almost the same age, Ashley replied, keeping her eyes on the child. I can recognize that cry. We don't know how long he's been here. I'm going to feed him right now. Are you sure, Ashley? Stephen asked, surprised by her sudden decision. Wouldn't it be better to wait until we get him to the hospital? No, she replied, determined. He can't wait. He's too weak. Ashley stood up and carried the baby to the patrol car. She sat in the back seat and, with care, began breastfeeding the child. The crying stopped within a few minutes, and the baby finally calmed down, looking up at her with his eyes still wet from tears. That was impressive, Stephen said, watching from the car's door. You just saved his life. Now let's get him to the hospital, Ashley said, adjusting the baby in her arms. We need to make sure he's okay. Stephen nodded without hesitation and got into the car while Ashley settled the baby carefully in her arms. They drove toward the hospital, the sound of the car's engine filling the silence, heavy with concern. During the drive, Stephen glanced at Ashley in the rearview mirror. Are you okay back there? He asked. Yeah, he's calmer now, Ashley replied, looking at the baby who was sleeping in her arms. But I can't stop thinking about how he was left in that state. Stephen sighed. Me neither. I hope we can find out who did this. They arrived at the hospital in less than 10 minutes. Ashley quickly got out of the car, the baby nestled in her arms. Stephen followed closely behind as she walked through the automatic doors and headed for the reception. Good afternoon, Ashley said to the receptionist in a firm but urgent voice. I'm a police officer, and we found this baby abandoned in an alley. He needs immediate medical attention. The receptionist looked at the baby and nodded, quickly grabbing the phone. Understood. I'll call someone to assist immediately, she said as she dialed a number. Ashley looked at Stephen, who crossed his arms and observed the activity around them. Less than 2 minutes later, a doctor in a white coat and a nurse arrived at the reception. The receptionist briefly explained the situation, and the doctor approached. I'm Dr. Jacob, he said, glancing at the baby. We'll take him to the assessment room and run the necessary tests. He's in good hands. Ashley carefully handed the baby to the nurse, who held him gently. Please keep the station updated on his condition and the results, she requested. This investigation is a priority. No problem, officer, the doctor said. We'll take care of him and contact you as soon as we know more. Ashley and Stephen thanked them before leaving the hospital. The ride back to the station was silent, both lost in their thoughts. When they arrived, they went straight to their superior's office. Captain, Stephen began reporting the details. We received a call about a baby abandoned in an alley crying. We found him in poor condition and took him to the hospital. The captain listened intently, frowning as Stephen detailed the events. When he finished, Ashley spoke up. "We need to start documenting the case and the investigation," she said. "But I have an important question. Where will the baby stay during the process?" The captain crossed his arms, thinking. "He'll probably be taken to a child welfare agency like Child Protective Services," he replied. "They'll take care of him until the case is resolved." Ashley felt a pang in her chest, hearing those words, but maintained her composure. She turned to the pile of paperwork, starting to fill out the necessary forms, while the thought of the baby in a shelter troubled her. After a few minutes, she couldn't hold it in any longer. "Captain, can I make a special request?" she asked, looking directly at him. "Of course, officer," he responded. "What are you thinking?" "I'd like to have temporary custody of the baby while the investigation is ongoing," she said. "I can take care of him until we find a responsible adult or resolve the case." The captain studied her for a moment, thoughtful. "You know this won't be easy, right? You already have a young child. Wouldn't you be overwhelmed?" "It won't be easy," Ashley admitted, speaking honestly, "but I can handle it. I'd love to help. Besides, I believe he needs a loving environment right now, something no government agency can offer." The captain sighed but nodded. "If you're willing, I can start the paperwork to make the temporary custody yours. But don't expect it to be simple." "Thank you, Captain," Ashley said, relieved. "I'll do my best to take care of him." With the captain's approval, Ashley knew that the process for obtaining temporary custody wouldn't be simple. The following weeks were marked by an exhausting sequence of bureaucratic steps that required patience and determination. As soon as the baby left the hospital, he was taken to a government agency responsible for caring for abandoned children. For Ashley, it was hard to accept that the little one would be in such an impersonal environment, but she knew she had to follow all the legal requirements to bring him home. The first steps involved filling out extensive forms detailing her financial condition, criminal background, and her ability to care for another child in addition to her son. Ashley had to gather a large amount of documents, including recommendation letters, proof of residence, and medical declarations that confirmed her physical and mental health. Between trips to the station and social services, Ashley also endured long interviews with professionals responsible for assessing her profile. The questions were detailed, often invasive, but she answered firmly and honestly, determined to do the best for the baby. During this period, the baby remained under the care of the government, in a shelter run by social workers. While she knew he was being well cared for, the idea that he wasn't receiving the love and attention of a family deeply disturbed Ashley. She kept herself updated on his condition whenever possible, but she could only wait and advance in the process. After weeks of paperwork, document analysis, and meetings with social workers, Ashley finally received the news she had been waiting for. Her request had been approved, and she was officially authorized to take temporary custody of the baby. The call came one late afternoon as she was finishing her shift. "You're eligible to take temporary custody," the social worker informed her. "You can pick him up tomorrow at the shelter." Ashley felt a huge sense of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted off her shoulders. The next day, after signing the last documents and finalizing the paperwork, she was finally able to bring the baby home. He was still a small stranger in many ways, but Ashley knew that now she had the chance to offer him a home and a better start while the investigation continued. When she arrived at her apartment, she carefully placed the baby in an improvised crib she had set up with whatever she had on hand. She prepared bottles, changed his diaper, and rocked him gently, singing softly as he fell asleep. That night, as she watched him sleep peacefully, Ashley felt a wave of peace, as if this little being had brought a new purpose to her life. The following weeks were a constant learning experience for Ashley. Adjusting to the new dynamic of caring for two children was challenging, but she felt driven by a greater purpose. Eric, her son, just over a year old, was at the stage where he babbled sounds and pointed at everything around him with curiosity. He seemed fascinated by the baby, whom Ashley had named Matthew, a choice she made to make daily life easier. One morning, Eric, sitting on the living room floor, pointed at Matthew, who was in the improvised crib nearby. "Bah," he babbled, looking at Ashley. "Yes, Eric, this is Matthew," Ashley said with a smile, picking Eric up. "He'll be with us for a while. Do you want to get to know him better?" Eric, still curious, stretched out his little hand and gently touched Matthew's arm. The baby, in response, moved his fingers and made an almost imperceptible sound, attracting even more attention from Eric. For Ashley, moments like this made up for the sleepless nights and the accumulated exhaustion. Watching Eric interact with Matthew so naturally warmed her heart. During the nights, however, the reality was different. Matthew cried from hunger or for comfort, while Eric still occasionally woke up, needing attention. Many times, Ashley found herself rocking both at the same time, alternating between comforting Matthew and feeding Eric. "We'll make it," she whispered to herself on one of those nights, sitting on the couch with a baby in each arm as the moonlight entered faintly through the window. Even exhausted, she felt like she was doing what was necessary, determined to give the best of herself to both little ones. At the station, the baby's case continued to be treated with the utmost priority. Ashley and Stephen knew that each day was crucial to find answers about the abandonment and ensure a safe future for the child. The investigation began with hospital records, cross-referencing information from nearby maternity wards. After days of reviewing records and analyzing reports, they finally found a concrete lead. The baby had been born about 6 months earlier at a municipal hospital, and the mother had been registered as Sarah Guzman. "We've got a name," Stephen said, placing the report on Ashley's desk. "Sarah Guzman. The baby was born healthy, but the record is basic. No fixed address or emergency contact." Ashley frowned as she studied the document. "We need to find her. Maybe she has an explanation for all this." The search for Sarah began immediately. First, Ashley and Stephen visited the hospital where the baby had been born. They spoke with the staff on duty at the time of the birth, but no one seemed to remember her clearly. The few records available indicated that Sarah had been discharged less than 24 hours after the birth and had left no contact information. "She left quickly," Stephen commented as they left the hospital. "It's like she didn't want to be found. Or maybe she had nowhere to go," Ashley suggested, deep in thought. "Let's look for close relatives. Someone has to know where she is." The two began tracking Sarah's relatives through public records and interviews with neighbors from her last known address. They located an aunt, Emily, who lived in a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. When they arrived at her house, they were met with some distrust. "Sarah? I haven't seen her in a long time," Aunt Emily said, crossing her arms. "She was unstable, always moving around. The last time I heard from her was last year when she borrowed some money." "And what about the baby?" Ashley asked, trying to probe. "Did you know she was pregnant?" Aunt Emily shook her head. "Pregnant? She never told me anything. If she had a kid, she never mentioned it." "Understood," Stephen said, taking notes. "Would you by any chance like to take temporary custody of the child while we continue the investigation?" Aunt Emily's expression hardened. "I can't. I can barely take care of myself. And with all due respect, I don't know that baby." Disappointed, the officers continued their search. They also located a cousin of Sarah named Gregory, who worked at a mechanic's shop. When they found him, he confirmed that he hadn't heard from her in months. "She'd disappear for long stretches," Gregory explained, wiping his grease-covered hands on a cloth. "She always had a complicated life. But honestly, I don't know where she is now." "And about the baby?" Stephen asked. Did you know she had a child? Gregory looked visibly surprised. No, that's new to me. Sarah never told me anything. When the officers asked if he'd be willing to take custody of the child, Gregory also refused. I can't take care of a baby. My life's a mess. I hope you find someone better for him. With few leads left, the investigation continued. The hospital records indicated that Sarah hadn't listed the father's name at the time of the birth. However, after combing through more documents and cross-referencing information, the officers discovered a mention of a man named Kenneth Vargas, with whom Sarah had had a brief relationship. We need to talk to him, Ashley said, already organizing the documents for the visit. If he's the father, it's our responsibility to make sure he knows what happened. I agree, Stephen replied, grabbing the keys to the patrol car. But does he know anything? This case is already complicated enough. They arrived at the address provided, a small apartment in a modest building on the city's outskirts. Ashley rang the doorbell and waited. After a few moments, the door opened to reveal a tired but receptive man. Good afternoon, Ashley said, displaying her badge. Are you Kenneth Vargas? Yes, that's me, he replied, looking confused. What happened? Is everything okay? We need to talk about an important matter. Can we come in? Stephen asked. Kenneth stepped aside, gesturing for them to sit on the small couch. Sure, make yourselves comfortable. What's this about? Ashley took a deep breath before beginning. Mr. Vargas, we found an abandoned baby in an alley a few weeks ago. After investigating, we discovered that you may be the biological father of the child. Kenneth stood still for a moment, blinking as if trying to process what he'd just heard. What? A baby? My son? He ran his hands over his face, incredulous. This can't be. I didn't even know I had a son. We know you had a relationship with a woman named Sarah, Stephen said. She's been identified as the baby's mother. Sarah, Kenneth repeated, shaking his head. Yeah, we went out a few times, but she never told me she was pregnant. After that, she disappeared. I thought it ended there. Ashley exchanged a glance with Stephen before responding. We understand this is a surprise, but we need you to come with us to the station. We'll need to formalize some information and perform a paternity test to confirm. Kenneth nodded, visibly shaken. Of course, I want to help. And if he's my son, I want to meet him. At the station, Kenneth answered the questions truthfully. He seemed genuinely shocked by the situation and eager to learn more about the baby. How is he? He asked at one point, his voice trembling. Is he okay? He's in good condition, Ashley replied, but we want to make sure everything is done properly. The test will be conducted in the coming days. The following week, Kenneth went to the hospital to take the paternity test. Ashley organized all the paperwork and kept an eye on the baby, who was starting to form a bond with Eric. The two often stared at each other or babbled sounds that only they seemed to understand. You two are going to be best friends, Ashley said one day, watching the two sit on the living room rug. Eric tried to put a toy into Matthew's little hand, which only flailed in response. When the test results came back, the confirmation was clear. Kenneth was the biological father of the baby. The news was officially conveyed to him at the station. In a meeting with Ashley and the captain, Kenneth received the documents with trembling hands, reading and rereading them, as if needing more time to absorb the truth. So, he really is my son, Kenneth said, looking at Ashley, a mixture of disbelief and emotion in his eyes. What happens now? Ashley, maintaining a professional tone, explained the next steps. From this moment on, we can start the process of transferring full custody to you. However, this will take a few weeks of paperwork at the appropriate agencies. During this time, the baby will remain in my temporary care. Kenneth nodded, visibly anxious. I understand, but is he okay? How's he handling all of this? He's doing great, Ashley said with a gentle smile. I've been calling him Matthew. He's a calm baby, and my son Eric loves playing with him. But now that the process is finished, you'll be able to take him home soon. The following weeks were filled with a flurry of paperwork and visits to the responsible agencies. Kenneth attended every meeting, signed the necessary documents, and showed a genuine commitment. With each step completed, it became more apparent how much he wanted to be the father Matthew needed. Finally, the day arrived. Kenneth received formal authorization to take Matthew home. Ashley called him that morning. Kenneth, everything's ready. You can pick up Matthew this afternoon. I'll get his things together. On the other end of the line, Kenneth responded with a voice full of emotion. I'll be there. Thank you, Ashley, for everything. When Kenneth arrived at Ashley's house, the atmosphere was charged with emotions. She had dressed Matthew in clean clothes and packed a bag with his belongings, some diapers, bottles, and a stuffed animal. Kenneth walked in, looking at Ashley with gratitude and nervousness. Ashley, I don't know what to say, he began, looking at the baby in her arms. I'm happy and terrified at the same time. Ashley tried to smile, but her eyes were filled with tears. It's normal, Kenneth. Taking care of a child is a challenge, but you'll learn. And Matthew already likes you. He'll get used to you quickly. She handed the baby to Kenneth with care, but couldn't hold back the tears as she said goodbye. I know it was only temporary, but I've gotten attached to him, she admitted, wiping her face with her hand. He's special, and you're lucky to be his father. Kenneth held Matthew tightly, and seeing Ashley's tears, he spoke sincerely. Ashley, I'll never forget what you did for him. And for me. I promise I'll take care of him with everything I have. And I hope he can keep seeing you. I don't want to take you out of his life. Ashley nodded, smiling through her tears. Of course, Kenneth. Anytime you need help or want to bring him to visit me, I'll be here. In the following weeks, Kenneth dove into fatherhood. Despite the initial challenges, he proved dedicated, and his visits to Ashley remained frequent. He often brought Matthew so that she and Eric could see him. During these visits, Kenneth would ask questions about baby care and share Matthew's milestones. Ashley, he finally slept through the night, Kenneth said during a visit, as Ashley prepared coffee. I think I'm starting to get the hang of his routine. Good start, Ashley replied, laughing. But don't get too excited. They always surprise us. Over time, these visits became more than casual get-togethers. Kenneth began spending more time with Ashley and Eric, and the two boys became nearly inseparable. One weekend, Kenneth invited Ashley to a picnic in the park. While the children played, he looked at Ashley seriously. You know, Ashley, he said hesitantly, I think I've never really thanked you for what you've done for me and Matthew. You didn't just save him, you saved me too. You don't need to thank me, Kenneth, she replied, smiling. All I did was what I felt was right, and honestly, I'm happy to see how well you're doing as a dad. These moments of connection became more frequent. Kenneth began inviting her to dinners, and she reciprocated, cooking for him and Matthew at her house. Gradually, what had begun as friendship evolved into something more. Kenneth started expressing his feelings with simple gestures, a lingering glance, a light touch on the hand, an unexpected invitation to go out without the kids. Finally, one quiet evening, after the children had fallen asleep at Ashley's house following a family dinner, Kenneth sat beside her on the couch. He looked nervous but determined. Ashley, there's something I've been wanting to say for a while, he began, holding her hands. Since Matthew came into my life, so much has changed, but nothing has changed as much as the way I see you. You're amazing, Ashley, strong, dedicated, and someone I admire deeply. I was wondering if you would give us a chance for something more between us. Ashley sat silent for a moment, surprised but moved. Kenneth, I feel something for you too, she admitted, smiling. I think I've always felt it, but I was scared to complicate things. Complicate? Kenneth laughed, relieved. Ashley, you've already made my life better in so many ways. I think we can face anything together. They began a relationship with caution, but also with enthusiasm, joining their lives and forming an improvised family, but one full of love. Matthew and Eric grew up as brothers, and Kenneth and Ashley found strength in their daily challenges that brought them even closer together. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. See you in the next story.